going to call the meeting to order. It is 6 p.m. This is the regular meeting of the Kaneland Board of Education. We would like to inform all meeting attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. Mr. McCauley, Pledge of Allegiance on Veterans Day.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Mankowski.
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner.
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Dr. Lawler.
Here.
Mr. McCauley.
Here.
Mrs. Simmons.
Here.
Board President Gonzalez is absent.
With 6 members present, we have a quorum. Is there anything the board would like to move from consent to new business? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
And moved by Mr. McCauley, seconded by Ms. Simmons. All in favor, please signify by vote. Roll call? Roll call then.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Mankowski.
Aye. The motion carries 6-0. The agenda is approved. Now for board/superintendent salutes. I will turn it over to Dr. Rowland.
Good evening. This evening we are saluting our Board of Education members. It is Board of Education Appreciation. I believe we had a slide that we were going to project, but being on the, it should be coming. But I just want to thank all the Board of Education members for all of the hours of unpaid work that they put in. I can't read the numbers from here because my eyes don't work that well. But as we'll get a copy of this to all the board members, but the 7 board members here put in approximately 40 hours in board meetings alone. That doesn't count all of the telephone calls that they take from me during the week and all of the other unpaid tasks that they complete. So we just want to take a moment to thank them for all they do and for being willing to volunteer to do this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rowling. All right, the board appreciate. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I
Ms.
do
Bogan.
have one salute
Okay.
as well.
Thank you, Ms. Bogan. Go ahead. Dr. Bogan, go ahead.
Thank you. We have one other salute tonight, and I would like to call Mr. Tim Wolf to the podium, our Director of Technology. I just want to take a moment to recognize Mr. Wolf for his role, you will see on the consent agenda, for facilitating a generous donation of networking equipment from East Aurora School District. Tim's gonna share a little bit more about that, but I did just want to share with the board that this is just one of the many contributions that Mr. Wolf has made throughout his career at the district, and it really just, I think this really highlights his commitment to Kaneland, and just his ongoing efforts and how he's always seeking just innovative ways that he can help enhance our district's technology. And so I really just wanted to say thank you and recognize him for that. And
You're welcome.
You want to share?
Yeah, definitely. So I just want to give a shout out to East Aurora School District. All the directors of technology in Kane County, we have a really good camaraderie. We talk to each other, we support each other. And I was talking to Andy over at East Aurora, and they were replacing all their back-end hardware because they had replaced their Wi-Fi and they wanted to match. Long story short, he had pallets of equipment, and I said, Andy, what are you going to do with that? And then I offered him money, and then we went back and forth, and he's like, you know what, you can have it for free. So huge shout out to them. All the equipment you can purchase new, you can see in the memo there. It's about $800,000 new. We looked on eBay and other places, and we priced out what we could get it all for, and it was about $150,000. This will replace all of our back-end networking equipment in the entire school district. And then I think we'll have a little bit left over, so we'll have spare units too, so if something fails. If not, Andy's got a little more equipment that they're gonna be swapping out, so I'll hit him up for that too. So, but yeah, it's nice having that partnership with the other school districts around us, and, you know, we're there for each other, and it was just huge that East Aurora was able to help us out. So, any questions, or?
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right.
Stay friends with Andy.
All right. Next, we will move into the new business part of our meeting. The board appreciates everybody in attendance this evening.
Consent agenda first.
I'm sorry.
You said new business.
No. Oh, yeah. The board appreciates everybody in attendance this evening and invites you to stay as we move into consent agenda / new business part of the meeting. We understand that not everybody is able to stay for the entire meeting. We wanted to make sure you know that this is an open meeting, so you are able to come and go as you need. And we look forward to seeing you at future meetings. Tonight's consent agenda contains the following information. Action items. 1, the approval of the treasurer's report for October 2024. 2, approval of the minutes of October 28th, 2024 regular meeting. Approval of personnel. Approval of destruction of audio recordings from closed session meetings from May 2023. Approval of the school improvement plan for 2024/2025. And approval of technology and equipment from East Aurora School District 131, and the informational items, the student suspension data report, and the field trip notification. I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent items listed.
So moved. Second.
All right,
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Mankowski.
aye.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. The consent agenda is approved. All right, first, public comment. We use the public comment section as an opportunity to listen to our stakeholders. The board does not debate or engage in conversation during this time. I'd like to remind everybody to state your name and village of residence for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Public comment is a maximum of 30 minutes with a 20-minute total length of time for any one subject. Those who speak are asked to maintain a tone of courtesy and civility. And on public wanting to speak, Ms. Tonya Grosinger.
Good evening, everybody. Tonya Grosinger from Maple Park, 3 kids at Stewart. First, I want to say thank you to any veterans we might have here. Just wanted to get that out there on Veterans Day. Mr. McCauley, thank you. I want to talk really quick. I've had discussions and meetings with certain staff and certain members of administration regarding this subject, so this is more of just informational, and it's being brought up again in my home because of conferences that just happened last week, so I wanted to come and share it with the board so they're understanding what's going on. I had 2 kids at the end of last year, one in 3rd grade, one in 1st grade, who by the end of the year were at reading levels for my daughter, who is in 1st grade, that were at the end of 3rd grade level, and my son had finished his 3rd grade pathways by the end of spring break. So they were ahead in both things at the end of the school year last year. Unfortunately, my son was not given the opportunity to keep advancing. Personalized learning, which is something that I feel the district is strongly pushing and strongly trying to do, kind of failed both of my kids last year in 2 different grades with 2 different teachers in 2 different subjects. And again, I've been in contact with people, so this is more just informational, but the reason it's coming up again is because specifically with my son, he finished his pathways at the end of, for 3rd grade after spring break, and instead of being given the opportunity to continue advancing, he was told to just help his friends for the end of the year. Math is a subject that he loves. He is so good at it. He's way better than me. If I have math problems I need done quickly, I ask my 9-year-old. I don't even bother trying. He's amazing. And this year he seems to be slowing down a little bit, and that was made mention in his math conference. And I was assured and tried to assure him that even if you finish 4th grade before 4th grade is over, they've assured me you'll continue. They'll give you 5th grade. You'll start with 5th grade. But it kicked him in the gut is the only way I can put it. So much that he has 0 desire to actually push himself. And seeing a kid who was literally multiplying numbers at the age of 3 in his head in the back of my car, to now he's just like, yeah, no, my math is fine or whatever. I strongly attribute it to the lack of motivation that was given to him at the end of last year. And so in case anybody else is struggling with this in the district, I just wanted it made known that this was what was going on and where I'm at with my student trying to push him forward this year.
Thank you, Ms. Grosinger. Is there anyone else who would like to make a public comment? Please state your name and residence.
My name is David Diaz, and I'm a resident of Elburn. I was made aware from a couple of students that the chant of your body, my choice is circulating the high school, and teachers aren't able to see who's saying it to do anything about it. Fair points. There's merchandise that is available with that catchphrase. The current school handbook makes it a remove the shirt option, but it's a threat, and I'm unsure of how those two work. You have students threatening other students, and the only punishment is change your shirt. I would love to hear from anyone how that makes sense. I get freedom of speech. Huge fan of it. Really not a fan of dress codes in general. But a threat is being made, but our school handbook says, change your clothes. At some point, I would love to hear how the school district is going to handle that, because I don't see this going away, because it keeps getting louder and louder on the web. I work in e-commerce. I hear web all the time. So if it's getting louder there, it's getting louder with the kids, and I doubt it will be very long before the merch shows up.
Thank you, Mr. Dietz. Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to? Mr. Stalkup.
Hi, Scott Stolkup. I have 3 kids in the district. I just wanted to shout out to the cross-country team that was down at state. I was lucky enough to go down and watch it. It was quite an event, and kids did wonderful, just phenomenal. It was a little sloppy day, but I just wanted to shout out to them and thank the Dr. Rowling and Dr. Roman for coming down, supporting the kids. It was just a great day, great event. They took 5th overall in the state in 2A. So we had a 3rd place finish and a 6th place finisher. So I just wanted to recognize them.
Thank you, Mr. Stalka. Anybody else for public comment? All right, with that, we will close public comment and move on to new business. The first item of new business is the 2023-2024 audit report for the Fox Valley Career Center. Dr. Bogan?
Yes, we have a representative here from Lauterbach and Amen, our auditing firm, who's going to come up and share both the Fox Valley Career Center information about the audit as well as for Kaneland 302. Just as a reminder, copies of both full audits were shared digitally, and then after today's meeting, I will also share hard copies, physical copies with everyone, and then at the next meeting, November 25th, you'll be asked to approve the audits as part of consent agenda.
Okay, I'm going to go through the school district first, if that's okay.
Sure.
Sure.
My name is Allison Kamen. I'm from Lauterbach and Amen. I was the manager in charge of the audit this year. First off, I would like to apologize. We don't have the copies in front of you. Typically, we do like to have them in front of you, so I will skip going through page number specifics and just shout out the actual report titles. But if at any point you have any questions, please go ahead and stop me. I would like to start off by just thanking Jackie for all of her assistance. This report is not possible without your help, so do appreciate that. Also, would like to congratulate the district on the annual comprehensive financial report from ASBO that was received this year, and hopefully this time next year we'll be congratulating you yet again as we've applied for the same award. I'm going to go ahead and go to the audit report opinion. It was a clean opinion this year for the district. That just means that there's no modifications of any kind. Going on to the management discussion and analysis, this report in itself, I'm not going to go through in detail, but I would highly recommend that you take the time to read it in detail when you receive the copy. It just gives an in-depth picture of the financial statements as a whole. Going on to the balance sheet, which I know you care deeply about. The general fund is made up of the education, operation and maintenance, working cash, and the land cash and impact fees fund. Had a total fund balance of $6.6 million, which is about 59% of your total fund balance of $11.2 million. Going to the income statement, there was a total net change in fund balance of about negative $700K, and if we're just talking about the general fund, that was a negative $115,000 of which most of that is likely attributed to just federal grant decrease in revenues this year, which we've seen across many school districts, and there was also a transfer out of $102,000 to the debt service fund. There's also the notes to the financial statements. Here, again, not going to go through page by page, but you can find the capital and long-term debt schedules in this section. I would highly recommend reading those. The budgetary schedules are towards the back. These, you'll find that at first there's some high-level budgetary information for the general funds and transportation funds, but then there's actually more detailed for every single fund in the supplementary information. Moving on to the management letter. For our current year recommendations, there's 3, of which 2 are just our GASB pronouncements, 102 and 103. Those will just be working with the district in order to implement those as they come up. One will be implemented in 2025 and one will be implemented in 2026. Those are just more of an for your information. That's not a ding or anything like that. Every single district receives those. The last recommendation for this year is funds were not in compliance with the fund balance policy. That is actually a recommendation that has carried over from prior year. Moving over to prior year recommendations, as I mentioned, 1 carries over from prior year. Last year there were 4 recommendations, 2 of which remain, 1 being the funds over budget, and then the other one is a GASB pronouncement 101, which will be implemented in 2025. Any questions over at the district financials? No?
And just so the board knows, this will be posted on our website after the board approves on the 25th, so it'll be available for public viewing. People can always reach out to me with questions, things like that, any more in-depth information that people would like.
Okay. Moving on to the Career Center. Here we also have a clean opinion on the financial statements. And then the report pretty much follows the same. Again, would recommend reading the MD&A. For the income statement here, the net change in fund balance is actually an increase of about $408,000. The notes to the financial statements have very similar information with any supplemental schedules. Budgetary information will follow that as well. And then going to the management letter here. Here we just, for current year recommendations, have 2 GASB pronouncements, 102 and 103, same implementation years as the district. And then prior recommendations were just 2 GASB pronouncements, 100 and 101. For prior recommendations, 101 will still be in effect for being implemented in 2025. Again, we'll work with the Career Center to implement those when the time comes. Any questions on the Career Center financial statements? No? Okay. All right, well, thank you very much.
The only thing that I would like to add on that is just a thank you to Judy Van Bogart and the business office team who do an incredible amount of work to assist in the audit process. Without them, this would not be possible. Thank you to the team at Lauterbach and Allman for all your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, there is no required action for J1 and J2. At this time, we will move on to the third item of new business is a presentation of the school report card data. Dr. Rowling, if you could provide more information.
All right, thank you. For this, I'm going to invite Dr. Mumm and Dr. Horn to the podium also. This evening, we are going to be reviewing data related to the school report card. Just as a reminder, that we will have some related presentations coming up throughout the winter and into the spring regarding our curriculum process and some of our other curriculum updates. So I'm going to have Dr. Mumm is running the show for me here this evening. But essentially this evening, we are going to be talking a little bit about designations, explaining that process to the board and how that works. We are going to talk about some data celebrations, some opportunities for growth, and then next steps. We will not, in the past, we've had much longer presentations. Tonight, we're not going to be covering any grade level data or any iReady data. We want to stay focused on data that is specifically tied to the report card. We can bring some of that other data back later in the year. And feel free to jump in with questions as we go. So each year, ISB provides all of our schools with a designation that's based on a scale score. And that scale score is 0 to 100, essentially. The scale score is derived from a fairly complex formula because it's ISB and that's how we do things. And each school is given a designation of exemplary, commendable, targeted, comprehensive, or intensive. Beep. So as we move on, oops, there we go. There are two equations to determine the scale score for school designations. One for K-8 schools and one for high schools. So you can see the numbers here. The ELA proficiency and math proficiency are based off of the IAR. All of our students, grades 3 through 8, take the IAR. The growth equation is based on essentially what ISB does is it takes all of the students, let's say third grade students that scored a particular score on the test, then they look at their fourth grade, how they scored on that test, and they basically just line them all up. And that's how they determine the growth. The average state growth will always be 50% because of the way they do it. So it resets every year. Because it resets every year, I think it's a challenging number to look at across years because you're not comparing apples to apples necessarily. We will talk about those growth scores, but just to help the board understand that a little bit. The science proficiency is based off of the Illinois science assessment. And then we have chronic absenteeism and the climate survey, which is a completion score. It is not a score given based on the results. It's a completion score. If we do not have a score, for example, a lot of our schools don't have English learner progress to proficiency score because of our low number of English learners in the district, that percentage is broken up amongst the other scores. So that 5% is then spread into all of those other indicators. All right, so moving on to the high school equation. The high school equation has ELA and math proficiency based off of the SAT for last year. We're moving into the ACT for this year. The science proficiency is still based off of the Illinois science assessment taken by our juniors. Graduation rate is the single largest impact here. It's 50% of our score. And the number that you'll see is actually a composite score of our 4-, 5-, and 6-year graduation rate. So the number that's presented on the report card is not the raw number from last year's graduating class. And then 9th grade on track is another one that we've talked extensively about here at the table. So school designations for Kaneland for 2024, all of our schools ended up with a commendable rating with the exception of McDowell Elementary. They ended up with a targeted rating. And they're targeted for children with disabilities, which comprises students with 504 plans and IEPs. So a targeted school is a school that has an overall scale score in the commendable range. So McDowell's scale score falls between 84 and 40 for all students. But it has one or more student groups that fall below the all-student number for the lowest 5% of the schools. Subgroups have to have at least 20 students to produce scores in 5 of the 8 indicators. So you can see how ISB makes this really easy for us to do, to be counted on the report card. So like I said before, McDowell has been identified as a targeted school for children with disabilities. So these are the scores for our subgroups. We laid out all the subgroups that we report. It's important to note that none of our schools had subgroup scores for Black or English language learner subgroups. And you can see where a number of those boxes are filled in with a black color because we don't have scores there either. So as we go through, what you can see here is that really of all these things, we have one area, the children with disabilities at McDowell, that is struggling. We do have some other scores we're going to look into, but overall, most of our subgroups are performing in that commendable range. And, moving on, now we're gonna get into some third and fifth grade, data, so I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. Mumm.
Yep, so on this chart, it looks pretty small probably from where you're at, but you have it in front of you. We have math and we have ELA. The first chart at the top is math. And again, like Dr. Rowling said, this is kind of a composite score of all third through fifth grade together by schools. We are looking at the cohorts, so we look at a cohort and follow them from third to fourth to fifth. And we're also breaking it down by domain so that we can look specifically in subtraction, in addition, in geometry, and be able to break that down, and we'll bring that future data in. As a composite, you can see that we had 3 out of the 5 schools above state average, and while the proficiency score is not where we want it to be, and that's why we really do want to bring the math curriculum review up by 2 years to this year, because the proficiency is not at the level that we are where we want to be as a district. We did see some gains in the growth score. And so we're seeing, even without that consistent math tool currently, we're seeing some instructional pieces that are working in our students' learning, and we want to investigate in that growth score what instructional practices are working while we are doing our math review and bringing consistency in instruction and consistency in the math tool. In April of this year, we'll bring that proposed adopted consistent tool for math to the board for approval, which will hopefully bring that proficiency score up while we also investigate the benefits that we did see in some of the growth pieces, even without that one consistent tool within the math component. Along this, we are looking at some of the sections. There are specific sections that did have high proficiencies in math, which you'll see on a celebration slide, and we are diving into those specific sections to say what happened in those sections that went well, and what lessons can we learn within those sections of, what can we replicate within those instructional practices as well. In the ELA graph down below, you can see that all of them did make proficiency gains. We have adopted the scope and sequence about 2.5 years ago for reading, and the adopted tool of Fontes and Pinnell is about 2.5 years into practice right now, as well as word study is about 1.5 years into practice, and those two components make up that ELA test. And so we're seeing a little bit of the benefit of that adopted tool being in consistent practice for students, and so the gains there are starting to have a little bit of a profit for us in proficiency, with 3 of the schools above the state average, and overall the district had an 8% proficiency score gain in the composite scores, as well as seeing some of the growth scores at higher levels as well. And so we can see a little bit more benefit in the ELA learning process from having that review a couple years ago and getting that more consistent learning aspect in for our students that we're hoping that we will see in math coming out of this year and into the following year as we finish our curriculum review cycle work, which you'll see in our next step slides in a couple slides. The next slide is our science slide. We have had the newly adopted math program and scope and sequence and written curriculum for about 1 year now. It was adopted 2 years ago for about 1.5 years now. Actually, when the test was taken, it'd be about 1 year. All of the schools are above state level. You do see a little bit of inconsistency of scores. They dip a little when you have a newly adopted tool because sometimes you have vocabulary on newly adopted tools where you're using the tool, you're getting used to them, and the vocabulary from the newly adopted tool might not match the assessment. And so that's part of what a review team does, is look at how can we now bridge that back for students. The tool is a good learning tool for kids, but now we need to merge that back into how does this vocabulary link to what the test is asking you. And so this is a prime time to do that. That usually happens in about year 1.5 to 2 after you adopt something through the new adoption process. We are pleased where our proficiency scores are in science, but we know that making that vocabulary connection for students would help us increase those scores even more within that science realm at the 5th grade level. And this is only 5th grade. The other slide was 3rd through 5th grade together. ISA is only a 5th.
On the vocabulary part, do you notice where the issues tend to be around the life science part of the science evaluation tool?
A little-
As opposed to
Yeah.
earth science or chemistry or what?
You just brought up the actual one I was going to say too. A little bit with life, but we see it in earth a little bit too. Surprisingly, our science tool that we adopted probably is stronger in the vocabulary correlation to the ISA than our earth one is to ISA. And so it's just a matter of making, I think some of the videos, I don't know, when you buy that product, it's not always developed just specifically for Illinois. And so I think we have probably better correlation in some of the life than earth. But I haven't by any means seen all of the videos by far. And so that's just an initial kind of blush at some of the discussions that I've had.
And math hasn't really factored in on the science?
The math?
Yeah.
That's a great question. I would have to probably ask that question more directly to some of our educators. It's a great question. I can get back to you.
Probably higher up.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
When you're like high school.
More, yeah, maybe middle school,
or
high school.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Just
great
what I've
question. I'd love to pose
experienced.
to our 5th grade.
Okay.
So a couple of our celebrations I've mentioned briefly. We, pleased with seeing the continual increase of proficiency in ELA as that reflection of the new adoption. Continuing to work, any new adoption we have really does take that 5-year process to really get to the point of where we want to be. Knowing that we're just a couple 2.5 years in, a year and a half with word study, we're in that continual process. We did see some strong scores in the KIPLA Inspire in both math and ELA, so we want to investigate what structures of learning took place there that could be replicated, or are they unique to a personalized learning setting and not necessarily transferable to traditional settings, but it's a great question to ask for sure. We did see strong math scores in growth in Stewart and Shields math, and so those are conversations that we want to have with our MTSS teams and administrators there, and then our science overall. I did mention there were individual sections too. I know we're not getting down into the section data today, but we did list a couple sections having more in-depth conversations, explicitly looking at some of the practices and how we can replicate or lessons learned from them.
Mrs. Mum, could you explain how there's math growth in John Shields and John Stewart? Explain the data. How is math growth? It is high at John Shields, but from last year, proficiency dropped 22%. How does that work?
Yep, so it kind of goes to the growth equation that Dr. Rowling was talking about. When you line all the scores up across the state, their scores were higher than when you line them up in comparison to other scores in the state, they lined up higher, but when they compared to Shields from previous years, they weren't, the proficiency wasn't there.
And you could have students that are moving, there's
From grade.
5 different ratings students can get, right? So students might not have hit that proficiency mark, but they may have grown.
Okay.
And additionally, the proficiency score would include 3rd graders, whereas the growth can only include 4th and 5th graders. Does that make sense?
Okay.
It
That
does be
would be
alarming.
alarming. Yeah, that would be alarming data that 3rd graders aren't doing very well.
Right. But you're not comparing apples to apples when you do that,
Right.
so it's not a fair.
That's why we always look at this as our first blush, and then we take these sections and we take those growth scores, and then we look at underneath it, let's look at cohorts now. And we look at that growth score and say, now let's take a cohort view of Shields math, let's say, and dive down into the cohorts and look at a consistent cohort trend, because then you can really see a consistent practice that has had a good outcome. And in some cases, you're exactly right. You'll look and say, we saw some beneficial growth, but then when you dive to that next layer, it's like, well, it almost, was it a real growth trend, or was it just that we compared well on that given year? And if we compare it all in that given year, there might not be a lesson that we can replicate for the future. Or, yes, it was a consistent, this cohort continues to push that growth, well then let's investigate what that cohort is doing that we might be able to replicate elsewhere. And so it's that initial blush that helps us dive into that next spot of learning, and so we can get closer to apples comparison.
So
Spot on.
So when we look at 22 to 2024, and we see it's dropping,
Yep.
is that is curriculum changing, or is practice changing? What is the effect that's causing that to dip? You know,
Dramatic.
I was gonna ask that.
there's dramatic. I mean, it is. So that's the question is.
How do you, when you do your data analysis, sorry, I'm
No,
gonna
you're
piggyback on what you're saying. When you do your data analysis, how do you know, how do you establish correlation, right? So is it practice and methodology? Is it batch of students, right? This one batch of students is better than this batch of students, right? Is it curricular? Is it testing? Like, so how do you break it all apart?
It's yes, yes, and yes, honestly is kind of the answer to it. But I think that the way to really do it, and the best, it kind of goes to one of the far next step here. One of the best next steps that I think answers a lot of those questions for us is when we can take the actual subtests of the IAR and compare it to the subtest of the iReady. Because in some cases, it's the cohort of students. And so when you watch that cohort of students, and you can see how they did on a subtest of, you know, the geometry here to the geometry here to the geometry here over time, you can see how that cohort is continuing in their geometry growth. And you can almost see, here's the moment in time where they hit a plateau. So why did they hit a plateau? Was it an instructional practice that was difficult? We didn't expose them with a certain, you know, way, and we need to support them differently. Or was it a vocabulary that came on? I can remember, and it's not testable, but in second grade, when I taught second grade, the minute you introduced a quarter, all the money became foreign language because it was a new concept to them and it just put up a barrier. And so sometimes, like for geometry, the minute you add a certain shape in, they forget almost, everything goes to a foreign language to them. And so is it a concept that throws a wrench into everything else? Or is it an instructional practice? Is it a rigor level in a concept? Or is it truly that we've created a little gap that grew to a big gap, that grew to a big gap, and we need to fill that with an instructional tool that we didn't previously give them exposure to? Or we haven't spiraled enough to give them a solid foundation, so when we hit that higher rigor, that spiral foundation wasn't solid enough to hit that next level of rigor. And so that breakdown that we're doing, where we take all of these, compare the domain tests in iReady compared to the domain tests in IAR, help us really pinpoint, is it the instructional practice? Is it a gap in the instructional book or tool? Or is it a gap in a spiral concept? We haven't practiced this enough to give them a strong enough foundation to move to the next level of rigor. And sometimes the answer is yes in two parts, and then we need to do professional development to fill both of those parts at the same time.
I would imagine it would be challenging too, because you course correct for one thing and it could snowball into the
Sure.
next thing.
Or
right?
it takes time away from something else that creates a little bit of a chink in that armor, yeah.
Sure.
And to add on to that, so that course correction, like how fast is that? Because like you were just talking about science, and so now you're recognizing that the vocabulary is not matching and the kids are struggling. So we could do professional development for our teachers, but what happens to those kids that didn't catch on this year, you know? And so what do you guys do as teachers and you know, you guys when it comes to making sure they're caught up to what was missed?
Yeah, our instructional coaches and I have a lot of conversation about like categorizing kind of those findings. And what do we categorize those quick fixes? This is a professional development quick fix that we can go in and have quick professional development conversations, and that's something that we know we can remedy. It's a matter of that quick vocabulary fix or this. We can get that message out at 8:05 professional development very quickly, and we can impact that immediately. And then we have our long-term planning fixes that we need to embed in new teacher induction and, you know, repeated professional development over the course of our SIP days, multiple years over time, and that sometimes takes a 2 to 3 year planning process. And so then in the process, we need to work with MTSS of how do we create supports for students that while we're making this long-term fix in professional development, how can we support students through our MTSS structure so that they're not just in a holding pattern missing something. Our MTSS staff can be quickly highly trained in some things to help fill some gaps with targeted students.
Dr. Mung, could you, and sorry, just lots of questions, but could you maybe walk through what that would look like? Because I'm having a hard time seeing it because I'm just thinking from a teacher's perspective, it has to be an overwhelming amount of, because if you're constantly retooling them and be like, oh, I got to fix this and I got to go back and reteach this thing and I got to go back now. What are the supports and what does that look like to help fill all those gaps?
Yep. And I think it is like from an elementary teacher's perspective especially, it can be overwhelming because we're talking about it just in math. Right. And there's, 4 or 5 other subjects to teach in a given day, and there's new things in science, and there's new things in ELA, and I'm still growing in my knowledge of the word study assessment, and so trying to manage all of that, we're really trying to put together a professional development plan that gives the most priority to where we think our students' learning priority is. And clearly from the IAR data, math is our priority. You can see our focus area is math, but we also don't want to lose sight of ELA and the work we've done with word study and science. And so then our social science kind of teeters down a little bit, where social science was a huge PD last summer. And so we do sit and we try to really map out where can we get our biggest learning gains, and we typically prioritize math and ELA first. Previously, the last 3 years, it was ELA and writing, and followed by word study, and math teetered down a bit. And I think we are feeling the repercussions of that in IAR especially. We looked at iReady over the last couple of years, and math was maintaining in iReady, and I felt fairly confident to allow kind of our math PD to go down a bit, and that probably wasn't the best choice looking at IAR now. And now we need to build back up our math PD. And so we're trying to always kind of balance that PD, the limited time we have for professional development and the offerings with our biggest student needs.
Well, I think it's important to note too that, we're just looking at IAR here, and one of the weaknesses we have with the IAR is we take the test in March or April. Yep. We get our results in July.
Right.
Right, so it's not a great assessment to inform individual student learning. That's more related to our iReady tests that we do 3 times a year, or, the classroom-based tests. So, when we're looking at, one of the things we need to investigate, because our iReady scores don't match our IAR scores.
Right.
So we're gonna spend some time this winter looking, where is that disconnect? Does it have to do with when we're introducing a specific topic? Maybe there are things we introduced in April, after they'd taken the test, right? So there's a lot of moving pieces to that machine.
Yeah. It does sound like, and I don't know if this is good or bad, it does sound like there's a natural cycle to this, and I get it, right? We have a finite amount of energy and resources, so you can plug the holes as they come up, but you can't plug them all, and so you have to keep kind of letting some things slip and then things come back. I think we would love to see it creep faster, right? So like as we lose a little bit of ground, we bounce that back up a little bit quicker, right? As opposed to getting as low as we had gotten. But I appreciate what you're saying, that you're working on making that happen.
Yeah, and I think that's why, one of the things Dr. Mum mentioned early on is originally math was scheduled for 2028 curriculum review, and it was moved up to this year because of the trend that we had seen.
Yeah, which is good. So we're reacting to the situation and course correcting, so I think that's good.
Any issues with reading levels as they relate to the math scores? I saw this a lot in middle school.
Okay.
Middle school and high school. That if they can't understand the problem, the language behind the problem, they're a lot closer linked, particularly as we get to middle school and high school assessments.
It's a good question. I know we had a little bit of conversation last year with our MTSS coordinators about especially the word problems. The math test can be very heavy in word analysis. And we did have a little conversation about you can have a reader of the math test if you have a 504 accommodation. But a lot of students don't have that. And then you don't have that capability. One thing that we are doing a little bit this year that we have started with our staff in, we're creating tips to explicitly model now for students. How do we break down those word problem structures? How do we kind of teach now just in math instruction and science instruction, in ELA instruction, of taking a word problem and kind of breaking it apart so we can better readily understand, the ability to kind of process through them. And maybe that will kind of get to your question a little bit. Can we better identify students that would struggle on the reading portion of that math piece and support them a little bit better prior to the testing period, either with some MTSS support, whether it be a mini targeted intervention for a bit, or a study group prior to the test, or do they need some kind of a formal accommodation through a 504 so they could get some support on the test? I've never done a formal correlation. I think that's a great question as well to really dive into data-wise. I think we can start with explicitly teaching the deconstruction of some of those tests, test-taking tools.
I saw it in several schools.
Yes.
Where math scores were entirely related to
Yeah.
their ability
It is wordy.
to read and comprehend, word comprehension.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
To get back to Dr. Williams' point, is the curriculum the same as it was, math curriculum the same as it was in 2022?
It is, yeah. The math curriculum has not been updated probably for about 13 years.
Okay, I just don't want to throw the curriculum under the bus necessarily,
for
because
sure.
if it's the same curriculum and it's
Yep.
been in that place since 2022 and 2024, then it's not the curriculum's fault necessarily. I don't want to just scapegoat the curriculum. It has to be something else that's contributing to these numbers.
Well, I think that's the point too, right? I mean, part of it is there's teachers teaching this, right? There is curriculum or the semblance of curriculum for math, albeit maybe outdated, maybe not fully supported as it could be today. But teachers still have to be able to teach this, and they had been, because we're seeing scores dramatically drop over the last couple of years, right? And we can't throw this one on COVID. So there's there's an aspect of curriculum for sure. There's also the other aspect of the teachers who, or maybe the support from like a professional or
professional
development
yes.
standpoint.
Yep.
But has there been such a high rate of turnover in teachers where they're coming into a whole new curriculum that's let's call it outdated curriculum, and they're not entirely sure how to teach this to the students? Is that something that's the thing too? What does our turnover rate look like in in third through fifth grade? Does that play any kind of role into it?
I think, I don't know the turnover percent off the top of my head. I would have to check with HR for sure, but I know we definitely have had some new staff, and I would say, looking back at our PD offerings, math has not been definitely as prevalent as writing, reading, and word study for sure. And so you're right. I think even I can think to the new teacher induction, we were heavily in personalized learning techniques and word study and writing as the focus for sure. And so I agree with you. I don't know that there's one contributor to this story, and I don't want to say that I'm sharing it. It's the curriculum for sure.
Yeah.
And along with that package that comes in April, it's not just about the tool. The tool's only going to be as good as the PD package and the ongoing support and,
100%. But
the
I think
home
that's
connection.
kind of part of my point too, right?
Yeah.
Is that there is onus on the teachers themselves. I know we had a pretty smooth negotiation for contracts in the spring. It was a very, I think, agreeable contract, favorable to the teachers. So, I mean, I think from my standpoint, and I'm sure, from the community and parents of students, is through all of that, there is that expectation that we're going to have to make do with what we have currently as we change and transition into that. That has to be put back onto the teachers to be able to present this to these kids as best as possible. Understanding that, reading is a huge part of math unfortunately, because I don't know anybody else that liked word problems during taking math tests or any of that stuff. But that is a big aspect of it. So you have to have one with the other. But I do want us to look at this from all sides. I think to your point, we can't just lump it onto one thing and say, well, two years ago it was the exact same curriculum, so what is the difference? And I think that's part of isolating. Again, I know this is a funky way of calculating scores and test grading an entire district, but it always concerns me when we're looking at, over 70% of our elementary students can't read at grade level. That's what this is saying right here. Or is this math? I'm sorry, can't do math at grade level. Over 50% of our students can't read at grade level. That's, no matter how we slice that, that's still a concerning thing. And I know in some areas we are above state average, which is wonderful, but I also
We want to be higher. We want to be way beyond that.
I don't think that's the point at which
That's not our bar.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's
not
not
the-
that's not,
that's
I
not
don't
the
think
bar
our
we
bar for our
aspire to.
district and
Yep.
what our expectations are. And I know for you guys, you say too, I know that's not something, hey, we're 41% and that's how I know you guys want everybody to excel. We do want this excellence within our district, within our community. I know our parents want it for their kids and I mean, geez, they're gonna be taking care of us one day when we get older, so like, we gotta do a good job now, so we don't all end up in, the gutter one day, so.
Agreed.
So this might be out of the purview of this, but it piggybacks on what other board members have been saying. I know we have talked about this, that it would be also interesting to have data that goes beyond just 2022, that maybe goes all the way back to 2010 or 2005, and we could see much longer trends. And I know we've also had an interest in discussing these kinds of data points, not just compared to the state, but compared to more local or more comparable districts that we feel like we're actually competing with. Because we're not competing with CPS and we're not competing with downstate districts, right? Those are very different animals than what we are. So, like I said, I don't know if that's out of the purview for this discussion, but I think that's something to
We
continue.
did try to keep this presentation fairly focused, but we can definitely bring that back in another data presentation
I think that'd be great.
later this year.
Yeah.
Just quick question, not quick, sorry. But we talked about the teachers, but we also talked about, what about students? Their learning styles have changed. Are we accommodating to them, they're more tech savvy and stuff like that? Again, all of us, we had, pencil and paper, and that's what we've done. And so, like you said, if math, the curriculum hasn't changed, so our teachers have been teaching it for years, and so they should be established in, what they're teaching. But are we providing the kids how they need to do it? I mean, do we need to go back to old school where it's paper and pencil, or is it, how do you guys evaluate that kind of stuff? Because again, like, COVID did force us to go more technology heavy, but is that really good for our kids? So like not just for us, but the statewide too. How are they looking at that stuff when they look at stuff, especially curriculum that's been taught year after year? So you would think our teachers know how to teach it. That hasn't changed, but our students are sliding. And is it something that they need it differently, or they need to produce it differently? So.
I think there's a couple different ways to look at it, and I don't know the complete answer to it. I do think that investigating some of the sections that fare well in the proficiency score helps us kind of drill down into what are the avenues that you're kind of teaching the students, and is there variety in them, and what ways did the learners respond well, that way, when we can really drill down into when you find those learners that did have those higher proficiency scores and then produced well on that test. It is a computerized test, and so they have to have some experiences in that, tech-based taking of the test. And so, what ways, when you see that high proficiency score, what produced it? And what experiences did the learner previously have? That experience of diving into some of those sections, I think already just some of the conversations have started, and you can kind of see trends of experiences in allowing the student to have some choice in the way that they are accessing that learning. You can see in those sections that had a bit higher proficiency, that choice aspect has come up a little bit in the trend conversations. By no means have I gone to all of those sections yet, but just in the ones that I've started, it has been a trend of some have chosen that electronic means and some have chosen the paper pencil, and then came to electronic means when it came to the assessing part of it. And so that, I think, will produce really the ability to look in the aspect of the different ways that we can learn math We do want to give them the experience on a digital platform though, because the assessment will be on a digital platform. And so you don't want to just have paper pencil, because we saw that the first time that we went from paper pencil to the digital platform, it was a big change for them. And so we want to give them, replicate that experience for them prior to the IAR.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because something else I do in my life, I work with a lot of high schoolers, and I've seen a trend with them lately. They are less tech savvy now. They're absolutely less tech, because they're just texting. Social media is only a couple words. So when it comes to reading, comes to emails and stuff like that, they're reading less.
Interesting.
And so, the things that we're requiring them to do, I'm struggling more with these kids now than I have in over the last 10 years that I've worked with high schoolers, and so I'm wondering, I'm like, what they're doing, how they're utilizing tech, it's not to the extent of what we need them to do in school. There's difference there. So yeah, like, what is that? Not to go back old school, paper and pencil, but is there an in-between or something like that? And what are they missing? So, or what can we do as parents too, of like, help engaging them to, like I said, just even read a whole email. We don't even read a whole email, and so I can imagine what that looks like, when texts are not even full sentences or full words anymore, what that impact has on school, so.
And we probably have to be very strategic in what we select them to do in technology, and make sure it is a very substantial task versus maybe not the, just drill and skill math problem, but the engagement of something on there. And then you can do flashcards or drill and skill in a written format. Let's be very strategic about when is paper pencil and when is technology. I concur. That's a great idea.
Okay, moving on to middle school IAR data. So very comparable to the situation that you had with the elementary school. This is an average of the overall students enrolled. We're not breaking it down by grade level. We do have two attendance centers that we are comparing. One is obviously Kaneland Middle School, and the other is the Empower section at Kipla. And the first table up there that you see highlighted in yellow is a 3-year composite of the math grade or math percentages. And you can see both at Harder Middle School as well as Empower, we are trending below the state average in those scores there. A lot of the fixes will echo what Dr. Mum was saying in the work that we need to do, with our middle school teams and with our teachers at the middle school. You will see on the far right the math growth. While the average meets and exceeds is not where we see it, the categories that students fall into does not mean approaching below. You see students are growing in those areas. So we are not anywhere near where we want our students to be, but we do see some positive growth happening in both actually math and ELA. Second table, ELA, same setup where you have the proficiency for the last 3 years. And what you'll see with Empower is actually exceeding state average with the IAR. Okay, in science, both Harder Middle School as well as the Empower section of Kipla is trending above state average when it comes to the Illinois science assessment. So things to celebrate at the middle school, it is the fact that we are seeing growth within our ELA sections. We are trending above our state average within the science assessment. And we are, while not quite where we need to be, we are seeing that within the categories that students are progressing in a positive way. So I'm going to echo what Dr. Mum said and what Dr. Rowling said about the focus. The 6-8 alignment is looking to see how the iReady data is informing parts of the IAR and how we can use the existing structures such as our MTSS system that we have of support to meet students where they are, make it data informed to have improvement. As part of that, having some vertical articulation. So elementary school teachers working with middle school teachers working with high school teachers, because we are a unit district, K-12, making sure that the cohesive improvement effort so that all students are benefiting.
That second bullet point is starting to look at the ACT. As Dr. Rowling mentioned, you're going to look at some data on the SAT. The state of Illinois has moved to the ACT, so they are different tests. But if the end goal is to produce our students to be college and career ready, we need to be working with them the entire time so that the outcome that we're looking for in the 11th grade should start to inform some of the decisions we're making 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Dr. Horn, can I ask you a question? So, I would echo what a lot of board members have said. Obviously, these data points are concerning, and we want to see them get better. But they only tell part of the story. So I'm interested. What do teachers, what do MTSS specialists, what do these folks also think that's going on, right? So, have we had a chance to talk to them and see what they think maybe is the issue at large?
I have had conversations with teachers and with MTSS.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that I have enough to go on to actually make a statement on behalf of everybody.
Yeah, okay.
As far as that. So, and what I will share is, it really depends on who you talk to. There are individuals who take issue with the test and what the test is expecting of students.
Yeah.
Which is a fair point, however,
Sure.
we're still held accountable for it. There are concerns about kind of cohort to cohort and how that impacts what learning looks like at different grade levels and how that can sometimes sway things. And then there are some overall structural improvements that we're currently working on that we do need to ramp up. And that first bullet point of how we're going to be using the data that we already have.
Mm-hmm.
We have students taking the iReady. We have to produce on the IAR. So what we can improve upon is how we're actually using that data to get in the hands of teachers so they can make the informed decisions they need to in the classroom.
Okay.
That goes into time, that goes into professional development, that goes into ongoing professional learning, and how we balance that out is where I see the biggest opportunity here.
Sure.
Good question. Okay, so the 9-12, the way this is set up, you've got a 3-year trend in front of you, similar to elementary and middle school. It is broken into 4 different categories. ELA on the SAT, math on the SAT, and then the 9th grade on track, and then the graduation rate. So one thing that is different when we're talking about SAT scores when meeting and exceed at the high school compared to where we're looking 3-8, these are just juniors. So this is not a composite of the overall high school. When we report to the state, we have our students take the PSAT 9, PSAT 10. That doesn't go into the configuration. We have those data points. That's a topic for a different presentation. Here, this is the school report card. And for the state of Illinois, it's junior year. So when you're looking at those numbers, which they do vary, that is cohort to cohort. And what you will see in both math and in ELA, that we are performing above the state average. Certainly some room for improvement when we're looking. Math is probably our greatest area for improvement because the numbers are low. Statewide, the numbers are a little bit low, but we're not setting the bar with the state. So that's the drive moving forward, particularly because we have a unique opportunity now that we're shifting from the SAT to the ACT. So we're going to have to put some embedded professional learning as part of it, both in the short term, which you can do with the KLC level and taking a look at ACT style questions, to long-term training and how we build and shape and design our curriculum.
Can you, sorry not to interrupt you, I just want to make sure I ask this. Can you help us understand how students who are performing so below level, I mean 26%, 31%, right, are also on track and then graduate, right? Those seem like a disconnect to
Okay.
me, right?
So you've got a couple of different things happening here. So there are 2 years of growth, of maturity, of learning that happens between the last time they took the IAR in the 8th grade,
Okay.
compared to the SAT in the 11th grade, right? The other thing is there's a complete different level of buy-in. For our college-bound students, the SAT, while a lot of schools have gone to testing optional, a lot of schools are still using for merit-based scholarships. So you've got cohorts of kids that are not only have bought into it more, they're actually taking classes outside of Kaneland, because we run them in the evening for our students to take it with test-taking strategies. So it's not necessarily a fair comparison
Okay.
when you're taking a look at the SAT compared to the IAR. However, you do bring up an interesting point that these are the same cohort of students that appear to be underperforming throughout the system, and then while the numbers we can all agree have an opportunity to improve, it's not painting the same picture when you get to the SAT. So,
How do we
I don't know if I
motivate
answered your
students-
question.
How do we motivate students to take standardized testing seriously?
Yeah.
Good luck.
That is.
I look forward to your answer on that.
And the other thing that it's just the experience. So you're taking the PSAT 9, PSAT 10. You're looking at that score and thinking, what do I need to do to improve next time? IAR is a little bit different for a 7th grader. You're also talking to a 15-year-old and how they're going to interpret what they need to do for something that's 2 years out compared to a 12-year-old that just it's a score that they take and maybe they look at it, maybe they don't. So I think there's some cultural things we could do to create buy-in for our students because if it's important enough for us to take time out of your day and make you take it, it's important enough for us to explain why it is for it. So there's some opportunity to build some of that culture within our schools. All right, the freshmen on track. So that is a number that we have been watching and monitoring because it was on the decline. The good news is that it is up. We did stop the dip that was happening, and that began pre-pandemic when the numbers started going down on freshmen on track. One thing that happened this past school year, we moved our summer school to July. That was done with the intent of stopping the summer slip, so that students would be enrolled in summer school, go right back into school. It was well received. In fact, the exit survey from our students and from our parents overwhelmingly preferred having in July. One unintended consequence of that, the August 1st deadline of reporting information to the state did not coincide well with the July 31st deadline of summer school. So we had 19 freshmen engaged in credit recovery over the summer, so they are not part of that percentage point. So you would have had numbers into the 90% had they been there. So we have a plan for how we're going to kind of meet both things next year. We're going to run our credit recovery section June 15th to July 15th. That's an online program that students take. That way they're able to still get a little bit of summer on the front end of things, be engaged in some learning before they come back to school, and then we still get accurate reporting numbers for us. And in this case, it didn't impact our overall rating. We still would have been commendable one way or the other. We just want to make sure anything that we're putting out to the state, and I'm standing in front of a Board of Education explaining, is accurate. The 9th grade, we are trending currently at that 90%, but that does include the same situation. We had 2 students graduate in the summer that are not part of that 90%. So the number is slightly higher there. Okay, so the high school focus, we're going to continue at the Kaneland High School. We have a built-in system for our freshmen on track that has been helping. It's a team that meets regularly. It comprises of counselors, social worker, teachers, members of MTSS, administration, tracking our students to make sure that they are making a successful transition to the high school, to build that solid foundation to continue to build upon their success for the future. We want to identify areas within existing curriculum that align to ACT, continue to build upon that, and start to look for gaps. And then we want to make sure that we're establishing an ACT good baseline to set future goals. Okay. And other considerations, we are looking at test timeline. The IAR currently is offered before spring break. We have the opportunity to run it through April, which gives some additional instructional time for our students. We also have had students that don't necessarily take the test, might take break a little bit earlier, so it does create a different testing environment when you have everybody taking it after a couple weeks of instruction all at the same time, not distracted by spring break. We're going to continue our monitoring tools, as Dr. Malm mentioned, with the iReady and the IAR data, the comparison between the two, and then at the high school level, making sure that we're running summer school, particularly with credit recovery, in a manner such that we can report the accurate number to the state. Okay. Any additional questions?
Just a quick one, is there a parallel for 6th grade on track like there is for 9th grade on track?
At the middle school level, you don't earn credits the same way you do at the high school.
Okay.
We can look at Fs and track that. It doesn't get reported to the state, but for in-house record keeping, I could tell you at the middle school, they are really on top of their students and intervening. That's the MTSS is built around when our students are struggling. So I guess it's kind of one of those yes and no's.
Okay.
Yes, we're monitoring 6th graders to make sure they make that successful transition. Yes, we're interviewing when they're struggling. But no, we don't report it out the same way because they're not earning credits.
But we're doing some of that kind of work.
Correct.
Yeah, correct. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mum. Thank you, Dr. Horn.
Thank you, guys.
There is no required action for J3. The fourth item of new business is a presentation of the Kaneland referendum update, student survey feedback. Dr. Rowling, if you'll provide more information.
Yeah, I did not put that on the screen ahead of time, I don't think. Sorry, it's my first presentation here. Do you know if we can pull it up? Sorry. So, as we get that ready, we went and met with all of our students, we surveyed all of our students back in mid-October regarding the conditions of the Kaneland High School facility. And so, I don't know. Okay, that's not a, you have a hard copy.
Your hard copy.
Okay, well, we'll just go from the hard copy and I'll dictate to the community. I apologize. So, essentially, our students were surveyed during their homeroom classes. So we had 608 students reply. And out of 1,200-ish students, I will tell you that if you can get about half of high school kids to do anything, you are winning. So, so as we look at it, we also had about 150 students to agree to participate in focus groups. We've had our first 2 focus groups, and here we go. All right. So we've had our first 2 focus groups, and it has been great to talk to our students about the. You're just going to go through the PDF? Okay, cool. We'll do it that way. All right. So we're going to go over the survey results. Sorry, we're ad-libbing a little bit here. But we're going to go through the survey results and talk about what our students had to say. So, as we look at question 1, essentially, how satisfied are you with the condition of your classrooms? Our students landed fairly in the middle. As we talked about some of the classroom conditions, though, individually, and you'll see in some of the feedback that they gave, there are some concerns with some of their classrooms. I think this is a unique one because depending on where your classes are located in the building can have a big impact on the actual condition of that classroom. Moving on to question 2, how important is it to you that your school has modern facilities? I think the chart essentially speaks for itself on that, with our students putting a lot of focus on wanting to have modern facilities. Moving on to question number 3, do you believe that improving the facilities will have a positive impact on the overall learning environment? This is one where, again, the chart speaks very loud. And as we heard students, as we talked to students, they talked about a variety of reasons for this, from inconsistent temperatures to outdated classrooms to some of the issues we'll talk about with some pests in the building because of the some of the age. So again, we'll circle back to some of their feedback on that. Question number 4, looking at how often do you feel that the condition of the PE athletic facilities limit your ability to participate fully? we have about 40-ish% saying very often or often, and then a good chunk saying sometimes. I think, again, as we talk about that with some of their feedback, it depends on how much time you spend in the gyms. I don't know why I jumped to question 7. I don't know why it's question 7. I apologize for that. How satisfied are you with the overall condition of the locker rooms? Again, speaking pretty loudly on the condition of the locker rooms. And I will tell you, if you've been in, I had the opportunity to be in the West Gym locker rooms the other day, and I'm not a tall man, and I feel really tall in those locker rooms. So those locker rooms definitely leave quite a bit to be desired. Same things with the bathrooms. We've talked extensively about the bathrooms. I think the satisfaction with the condition of the bathrooms is quite clear if you as you look at those results. And then I think getting into more of the meat, and that is the student feedback. Now, we had literally hundreds of responses with specific feedback for us. And so I tried to hit on some of the bigger topics that came up. This certainly is not an exhaustive list. But the following topics were most commonly addressed. The athletic facilities. The number one thing there over and over again is the desire for a field house. In the panels, we had students talk about how they've even had, as they go to other buildings, one of them cited LaSalle, Peru, made comments to us about the lack, we don't have a field house, we don't have these facilities. So it does wear on our students as they have a lot of pride in the school, but it's a challenge for them. The condition of fields, especially the outdoor fields, talking about some drainage issues. And then insufficient and outdated locker rooms came up repeatedly. Moving on to bathroom conditions, I think we've talked about this at length, but outdated, unreliable, general cleanliness is keeping old pieces of equipment clean is a challenge, and the leaks and whatnot. And then long lines due to inadequate facilities, not enough bathrooms, and it's fairly often that we have one go down, right? So we end up having to close a restroom, and then you have to walk all the way across the school to go to the restroom. Moving on, the HVAC concerns, a lack of AC in our PE and athletic facilities, extreme and inconsistent temperatures in the building. Students actually talked about, last year when they had retake policies, that one of the reasons that one of the teachers gave for retake was too cold in the classroom, because some of the classrooms are brutally cold in the winter. And then musty air and mold concerns. Additional safety concerns, they talked about the C hallway rooms, feeling unsafe in some of those science labs. Exterior doors that need to be replaced that don't close correctly. And then moving into some of the classroom items, outdated small classrooms. They talked about outdated furniture. We had one young man who's, I'm gonna guess he's 6'2", probably 230 pounds, a pretty big guy. Talked about not fitting in the desks. And as a big guy, I can appreciate that, but the desks don't allow for flexible movement throughout the class. The rooms, some of them are very, very small, so really your only option is to put kids in a row. They talked about traffic flow in small hallways. I think many of us have heard about the blender, but there are other concerns with the hallways. General poor conditions and need for an update. There are a lot of student comments that said, basically we went from Harder to the high school, and the juxtaposition there. And then pest management, and we do our team works hard. Especially with mice, we're located, we're surrounded completely by fields. So this time of year, Our friends in the fields are moving to their winter homes that happen to be indoors, since we're the biggest building around. But additionally, because of the age of some of our doors, windows, and other things in the building, we're fighting an uphill battle. They're finding the little holes and squeezing in. So those are the significant pieces of feedback from our students. I'd love to have Ms. Slattery talk a little bit about this, if she would. I gave her a heads up this was happening. I'm not putting her on the spot here.
Surprise.
Yeah.
Pop quiz.
Yeah, pop quiz. Tell me about the high school.
Yeah, no, I was well aware. So yeah, when Dr. Rowling shared this with me, I was not surprised by the results at all. I agree with about like 99% of these. I'm in the school from around like 6:45 in the morning to about 3, and I can attest to all of these, especially the bathrooms, locker rooms, heating and cooling, certain things. A lot of them need to be updated, and I think if they are updated, people will want to be at school more. I know a lot of people that feel not necessarily unsafe, but like some things just are so old that it's almost like kind of embarrassing. Like, I have a teacher who's in the B hallway, and his door literally broke. Like, the part of it just like snapped off, and it was just hanging with like screws, and it wasn't fixed for a very long time. So I know there's things like that, and then also the like ceiling tiles on the ceilings can have holes in them, or there's just not even a tile there at all. And that's especially in some of the bathrooms. And I think some of these things, just if they are fixed, people will want to be at school more, and they'll genuinely care more. So.
Can I ask you one question of like, because yeah, you guys are the ones here, you're the ones, and the teachers too, so your voices, and their voices are the most, but it's their parents that are the voting person, you know? So how do we help you guys to get your voices to the parents and to the other community members? Or are the students, do they feel like that's a role for them too, to share that? Because a lot of our parents are like, they don't see the need as dire as you guys see the need. You guys are here. So how do we make that how do we translate that for our community?
I think that is something kind of difficult for people my age, just because they feel like, oh, it's just not going to change anyway. Kind of that mentality, when I feel if like people do, like parents and their kids do talk about it more, I think it would be a lot more beneficial, so that they're actually understanding what their children are going through and having to live with on a day-to-day basis. And I think if they're able to talk more about it, I think it's something that's not like talked as much about. Like, obviously they're like, oh yeah, I saw a cockroach in the bathroom the other day, took a picture of it, showed parents, yeah. But like, how does that like affect you, I guess, in a sense? And then maybe the parents would like understand it more.
We want to be respectful to you too. It's not necessarily something that should be your burden to have those conversations with your parents.
Yeah.
That's something for us too. So again, understanding more, what is your comfort level, or like what do you see for high schoolers, and you know, is it something that they're like willing to rally and champion and have those conversations? Is it something that like flyers that we give to you guys to give to their parents, or is it something that we thank you, this is where yours it ends because you gave us all the information, and now it's for us to take it to the next level to the parents? So I just want to understand that a little bit more, so thank you.
Was there any other questions from
Any other questions for me?
Thank you.
All right. As a reminder, at our next meeting, I will be bringing back the feedback from our staff meetings and from our community outreach. As we wrapped up our series of town halls and shows last week, so I will be bringing that back in a couple of weeks.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, there is no action required for J4. The fifth item of new business is the discussion of Crown Community Development tax increment financing in Sugar Grove. Dr. Rowling, if you could provide some more information.
Sure, I'm going to just go ahead and invite Mr. Flory to the podium, and he's going to provide an update as to where we are and answer any questions that the board might have.
Thank you, Dr. Rowling. Good evening. I would like to talk to you about the status of the negotiations for a proposed intergovernmental agreement with the village. We started out with a remote meeting with several representatives of the school district, several representatives of the village. Dr. Rowling was there, Dr. Layden was there, Ms. Bogan was there, and I would call it productive. We went through each of the categories. The last time we spoke about this, we're focusing on the 5 different categories that the village has proposed. The first being school tuition payments. We had discussions of that, and the ball is in my court now to revise the intergovernmental agreement that I first put together to reflect maximizing the payments in each of these categories. So I have several ways I would like to achieve that, and instead of getting into those details now, I will present you with the IGA once I've drafted that. So, but the idea again is to maximize all of that available money. The remaining next 3 categories: residential permits, school impact fees, and school land cash fees. I intended to try to work on those, to try to update those. That's not going to be possible. Those figures are set by the development agreement, so those cannot be changed at this point. But going forward, the village would consider updating those for future residential development. The TIF surplus, they've committed to the 10% overall surplus, and the school district obviously is going to receive 70% of that because that's your portion of the tax bill. And we also discussed using, before declaring any additional surplus, the village would consider paying for school improvements to the buildings, which is a TIF eligible cost. We would submit a list of improvements, the approximate values, and the village would consider making payments to us before declaring surplus above and beyond the 10%. Again, I said the ball's in my court. I'll be drafting the agreement, getting over to the village and to staff to take a look at before we send it over. It will include releases by both sides of any pending disputes between the parties. The PAC complaint would go away. We would be releasing any threat of challenging the creation of the TIF, but not the administration of the TIF. So if they made some errors in administering it, we would still be able to address those errors. And I think we're hopeful. I think based on several meetings that Dr. Rowling had prior to our Zoom meeting and conversations I've had with the TIF attorney, I'm confident that we'll get an agreement that's certainly beneficial to Kaneland, and we'll talk about the more specific details when you have it in front of you. And I'll be glad to answer any questions that any of you have.
But it's still no guarantee. Right? Is that,
They have to
make all the negotiations and all the promises, there's no guarantee, correct?
At this point, they want to see our language. So we talk concepts. So it's all the devil's always in the details. So they'll look at our language, but this you can't have it. There's no guarantee because you don't know if the increment will be generated that they're proposing. But if it is, we're setting it up so you can maximize all the available increment that they've set aside for you. Namely, the tuition category, and also using additional funds down the road for school improvements.
When we talked a couple of times ago about the tuition reimbursement, they put, I think on their reply back to us is that would be net of other students.
I don't want to get into those details at this point.
Okay.
Because we'll put the language together, and I think it'll be clear at that point.
I just want to make sure we're still on the same page with that.
I have several ways to maximize that column.
Okay, perfect.
Ken, you did say that it's sort of a tit for tat where they drop the PAC, we drop the,
Our challenge to the legality of this creation.
I was trying to say it way more politically than I wanted to. Yeah, so that's how, yeah. Yeah, that's the plan?
That's the plan. And I did receive a commitment specifically for that, for the dropping of the PAC complaint.
Okay. I need to think through that. I have questions about it, but I need to think through that some more.
Yeah, I think once you have the agreement language in front of you, and we'll go over that at a future meeting, it'll be, I imagine that'll generate a lot more questions. And then that's, at that point, it's the go or no-go point for you to make the decision of, do we go down the litigation route, or do we go down the intergovernmental agreement route?
So this is more just an update of where things are at and how you've already talked to them and plans for the next meeting.
Pardon me?
This is more like an update
Yes,
of what's going to
yeah,
happen.
well, first of all, let you know that we have had progress.
Yeah.
And for a while there, we weren't sure if we were going to have progress, but we had very productive meetings and conversations. Dr. Rowling has had several great conversations with his counterpart over there, the village administrator, and I think that paved the way for very productive talks.
Dr. Bogan, you've been going to the meetings too? Is that what I heard?
Yes.
It's good to have our finance person there.
Oh, I don't go anywhere without her. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
All right. Anything further? All right, there is no action required for J5. The sixth item of new business is the discussion of Infinite Campus credit card processing fees. Dr. Bogan, could you please provide more information?
Yes, you do have a fairly detailed memo in front of you, but this is one topic that we wanted to bring up for discussion in case there were any questions. Tonight there is no action on this, but I will be bringing this back on the, along with the next topic, as part of the consent agenda at the November 25th meeting. So at the start of last school year, FY24, the district implemented a system called Infinite Campus, and it's a system that essentially centralizes student data and also helps streamline online payments. At the time that we implemented, the district took on the burden of handling all of the credit card fees associated with this. And so right now, Kaneland is covering all of those fees, which includes a 35-cent transaction fee for every transaction, whether it's in food service, whether it's a registration, anything, as well as a percentage of the actual credit card processing. So for Visa and MasterCard, it's 3.5% on every transaction, and on American Express, it is 4.65%. I did a look back, and last year the district spent just under $83,000 on just credit card fees. And so we are looking to reallocate those funds to something that better aligns with our mission, something that's directly related to the student, basically a direct benefit to students and staff in the classroom. And so I think what we're seeing across the board, you know, when I go out to a restaurant with my family, or if I use a credit card on a charge, you know, that is a convenience, right? I can pay cash, I could write a check for most of those things and not pay those additional fees. And so we are asking that we shift our practice and move this as of January 1st, that the user who's using the online system will pay for those fees. We'd like to use pretty much the month of December to communicate those changes to our families and to all of our groups. I think it's really important to know that people can always bring in cash, they can still write a check, and we won't, there are no fees associated with that. So the fees that are associated with this is not the district taking those fees. We're not getting that additional revenue. We are essentially subsidizing users for this online system, and so we would like to shift that practice.
It's going to be a per transaction?
It is
Yeah,
per transaction.
Per transaction fee. It's not going to be cooked into
Any of our fees or
Any of our-
anything. No, it's and the reason for that, the reason, you know, that I am going to make that recommendation is that people don't have to use the online system, right? There is another option if they don't want to pay those fees. And so you know, I know that for many of my things, I still like the convenience, right, of not having to write that check or not having to bring in cash, whether it's at a restaurant or, you know, at the grocery store or other things.
Are we gonna provide the option for like a Zelle or a Venmo, which I know the
Not
fees.
at this time.
Not, you don't anticipate that going forward?
Not with Zelle or Venmo, because I guess what we don't want to do is add another online processing system, right? It's good that we have it all housed in one system, so parents are only having to access one way to do it. But it is costly to do that, to have that online convenience.
Got it, okay.
I mean, it makes sense. Everywhere else we buy stuff, nobody gives us the option. No restaurant wants to eat the credit card charge. No, you know, go over to Jewel, they're not trying to pay your credit card charge for you. So, no, it makes complete sense in this case. And to your point, if you want to pay cash or check, I don't ever want to do that. It's a huge pain. So, you know, I mean, I just registered the cars, you know, with the state. There's a $3.85 additional, you know, processing fee to do it online. Or you can mail in a check and maybe it'll get there. Who knows? So, like, yeah, it only makes sense. It doesn't make sense for the district to be subsidizing all these transactions.
Thank you for finding something like this.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that you're digging deep into some of that stuff, because $83,000 could definitely make a big dent in something.
Well, I think this and the next item are examples of the work that Dr. Bogan is doing to try to resolve some of our budget issues, turning over every rock and finding these opportunities. So she's doing a lot of work with that. So I think this is the beginning of a couple of things that we'll be bringing to the table.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that hard work on that, because we've all said this at one point, there's gotta be a line item we can squeeze a little bit to get a little extra. You found it, so good job.
All right, thank you, Dr. Bogan. There's no required action for J6. The 7th item of new business is discussion of HPS group purchasing. Dr. Bogan, once again, if you could provide us more information.
Sure. One of the areas that we've really tried to look into this year is with regards to food service and what are some things that we could do. Gigi Statler, our food service director, has really done quite a bit of work and really helped bring this opportunity forward. Currently, the district, we have our purchasing agreement with Gordon Food Service. That was a bid that we do on an annual basis. And what we've seen over time, really since about 2019, is a huge increase in the cost of food. In some cases, on some of our items, they're 45% higher than they were 5 years ago. And so that's had a huge impact on our operations. One of the things that we've looked into is a group purchasing organization known as a GPO. We have found that a group purchasing organization called HPS, it doesn't stand for anything. It's not an acronym at this point, but it used to be a Health Purchasing Association, and so that's where it stems from. But they are an organization, and they have a contract with Gordon Food Service. And so by opting in to being a member, being part of this group purchasing organization, they're able to leverage a huge amount of group buying power. And so they're able to negotiate much lower rates on different items with Gordon Food Service. And so we had reached out to HPS to look at a billing cycle from last year, a typical billing cycle when we have, you know, sort of the average number of purchases. And what they did is they looked at, okay, if you were a member, here's the pricing that you would get compared to the pricing that you received last year. Here's also the additional rebates that you would be eligible for through this program. And through that process, they found that they anticipate we could save $85,000 just on being a member. So there is a cost to being a member. It is $3,275 for the annual membership. But I do also want to note that that $85,000 is just for our contract with Gordon Food Service, and what we would anticipate saving. HPS also contracts with 225 other companies that we'd like to explore, whether it's for bulk purchases in copy paper, paper goods, chemicals, all of sort of those other things that we could look at. So while this is the start of that, I do hope to come back to the board with, here's other ways I hope to utilize HPS in the future. And so we are looking, I would be looking to bring this back as part of the consent agenda on November 25th. And then we would get signed up for that if approved, and then we can start realizing those savings this year. I do also want to note that this is an annual membership, so if for some reason we decide that this isn't working out the way we had anticipated, we can cancel that membership, and it's only the cost of the $3,275. So,
Are the rebates item specific or more volume specific?
So
what are we looking at there?
It depends. So there's item rebates, and those could be if it's commodity based, things like that. But then there are also some, there also are some volume rebates that you'd be eligible for. So right now, for instance, Gordon Food Service is part of our contract. There's a $750 minimum for them to deliver to a specific location. So one of the challenging things is, you know, at the high school campus, we have the high school, and then we also have the KMAC building.
Right.
Even though that they're literally steps away from each other, they won't deliver specifically to one location unless they hit the individual 750, and so some of those things get updated with part of this contract. So, or this membership, I should say. Our contract with Gordon Food Service does not change.
Sounds great. Just gotta find 10 more of these and we're on the roll.
Just go through the list. So.
Just for clarification, it would be the same quality of food, correct?
Yeah, so it's the exact same food.
Okay.
So we still have our contract with Gordon Food Service. We're still doing, you know, we have the same order guide. We have the same purchasing capability. The GFS chicken tenders that we ordered last week are going to be the same once we're a member. The only thing that changes for us is that pricing. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
And this applies only to tangible items, not to services?
That's correct. This is
like
for
we
like.
talked about with electronics or electric, you know.
Correct.
Internet,
this is for
wireless,
goods specific. So,
tangible items.
tangible items, yes. Any other questions I can answer on that?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bogan. There's no required action for J7. The 8th item of new business is the approval of Kaneland High School coursebook on first reading. Dr. Rowling.
I'm going to invite Dr. Horn to the podium to go through this.
Hello again. All right, so I am here to present the course offering and description book for Kaneland High School. This is something that is a collaborative effort between building level administration, teachers, counselors. Process begins in early spring and then is finished in the fall. And representatives from the departments identify new classes to offer based on guidance from the district, guidance from the state, from strategic plan, changes in law. For approval this evening, I do have some clarification of some of our offerings, some of which have to do with the PACE framework that I presented to the board a couple meetings ago, and communicating to our parents and to our students different pathways that students have options for to get them ready for success once they're outside of high school. And then also a new dual credit class. Okay, so first is some cleaning up of some language. We did take a look at the graduation requirement. PE, health, and driver's ed, that has always been a graduation requirement. It's just going to be spelled out differently so that it's clear that you have to take each PE, health, and driver's ed, that it's not an option just to kind of lump them all together. We do have a caseload policy that aligns with the Illinois High School Athletic Association recommendation. Per the IHSA, a student to be competing at a state level tournament conference has to be passing 5 classes. It is recommended by the IHSA that all athletes are enrolled in 6 classes. At the high school, there are 9 periods throughout the day, one of which is homeroom, one of which is lunch. So it means there are 7 opportunities to be enrolled in a class. If a student has a late start, a study hall, you can see how that goes down. So we're asking all of our athletes to be enrolled in 6 classes. For the most part, the overwhelming majority of our students, athlete, non-athlete, are taking 6, 7 classes anyway. We just wanted something in writing to be clear with our families. There was a change to the weighted course section in the handbook. There was a removal from the AP drawing because when you went to the fine arts section, it was not AP drawing, it was AP art. So there were 2 different classes. The class that has been taught historically and the ones that students are signing up for is AP art. We just want to make sure that everything was correct. The next thing is the additional class. Part of our efforts is to expand opportunity for credit bearing classes. You can do that through a couple of different ways. The ways we've really honed in on historically has been through advanced placement, which is driven by the College Board and the AP exam. The other is through dual credit. There are a couple more steps with dual credit because you have to have the right licensure and credits earned as a teacher. So we did have Ms. Rachel Giles-Bachman, who had the necessary credentials to teach a theater appreciation class. So we are running a dual credit introduction to theater class that our students are now going to have the opportunity to take. And it's going to take the place of the theater appreciation class.
And it's a dual credit with Waubonsee?
That is dual credit with Waubonsee. That is correct. We had some language clarification. Creative Writing 2 was mistakenly placed as a required class. It has never been a required class, so that error has been fixed. Luckily, our counselors were aware of that, so the students were always taking the right class. We did update some of our classes. So Dreams and Nightmare, which is the junior level required class, we're putting English 11 as part of it. So that way when parents are working with the course offering book for registration, it's clear that that's what you take during the 11th grade. As the board is aware, we have an increase in our language learners at the high school. We have historically run an ESL class. We now have to have 2 different levels of it. So an ESL 1 and an ESL 2. That will be determined by access scores and placement recommendations of our language learners. We did some updates to how our students are being recommended for classes to get some additional teacher input. Having students pass classes, obviously with a C or better is always the ideal, but we also want to have opportunity for many of our classes, particularly with our dual credit, for our teachers to chime in and talk to the level of readiness for our students to engage in the class. The dual credit college algebra is being changed to dual credit college mathematics because that is more in line with how the class is designed to meet the needs of students transitioning into the freshman year of college. PE, we did have a change with driver's education as a semester-long class. Historically, it was only part of a semester, so it had to be balanced out with the PE activities. Because of the shift to the semester-long class for PE, that PE activities is no longer a thing that students need to be concerned with. Science, we are making changes to AP Physics to align ourselves with what is recommended by the College Board. College Board oversees AP offerings. We make adaptations at the school level to it. The recommendation is that it's a completed of Algebra 2 or being concurrently enrolled, meaning you're taking Algebra 2 at the same time you're taking AP Physics. Working with our science teacher and our science department, we believe that our students can be successful when they're dually enrolled in the classes. It does offer more opportunity for students to get into AP classes sooner at a younger level because they don't have to complete that necessarily Algebra 2 class before they're taking it. So if the college board that approves the syllabus is saying this is the recommendation, we're aligning ourselves with that. We're also adding a additional offering through our food science. That is a way you can get an elective science class. So it's a foods class that is tied to some science standards such that you will be able to get science credit for it. Social studies, we did have some antiquated language in there regarding retakes because the handbook was approved before we changed the retake policy in the spring. We just had to make some adjustments to that. So it is in line with the district policy on retakes. AP Microeconomics, we're moving the class and description from CTE to the Social Studies department because it really is designed to be more of a social studies class than a CTE course. All right, so CTE, there are a ton of changes that are being recommended here, and that is because of the cluster pathways. So I'm not going to read through all of them because I know it's getting late, but when you take a look at a finance and business service cluster, historically we have run a business 1 and a business 2. Getting more specific with our language so it aligns itself to what students are seeing when they get into the college level, or just understanding what it takes to be successful in that field. So within business, an introduction to business, of course that makes sense with the business 1. But business 2 does not tell you as much about what's going to be in that class as the banking and financing title does. So what the high school has done is gone through with our career and tech education, which has career clusters in agricultural, food and natural resources, human and public services, finance and business services, information technology, arts and communication, manufacturing, engineering, technology and trades, as well as work-based learning, and realigned the classes that were currently offered to be titled in a way that falls underneath that category, in a way that when students are working to strive to go into finance, to become a business person, that they're aware of the classes that are offered at the high school to eventually find success. There has been some removal of some classes, some addition. All of that can be found for you on different slides. There has been a change to foods and nutrition that is going to be for our older students, 10th and 12th grade. It has always been an expectation that you take foods 1 first before you take the foods 2. As part of the PACE framework, keep in mind you do have to have that CTE capstone course experience. That usually happens 11th or the 12th grade. So by having somebody take foods 1 as a freshman or maybe even as a sophomore, they go on to take the foods 2, then that's that capstone experience for them. And then that's it. Any questions?
I just want to say the high school has gone through, and I'll pass this around to the board, but as part of the PACE framework and the new CTE alignments, they have a draft of the Kaneland High School Career Guide. They did a nice job of identifying the different pathways, some of the careers you can go into through that pathway, and then courses that would align to that. So I'll just pass this around the board. We can take a look at it, and I think they expect to get that out to families soon.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay. At this time, I will entertain a motion that the Board of Education approves the 2025-2026 course offering book on first reading.
Second.
All right, and a roll call, please.
Mr. Cook?
Aye.
Mr. McCauley?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Abstain.
Mr. Mankiewicz?
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0-1.
Can I explain really quick?
No, yeah,
It's just because of the one class that dual credits into my actual division. Otherwise, I think everything's awesome. I'm pro everything. It's all great. I just don't want any conflicts of interest.
Yeah, in order to avoid a potential conflict of
Yep,
interest.
yep.
Yeah. All right, motion carries 501. Course offerings book on first reading is approved. And now it is time for superintendent report. Dr. Rowling?
I have two items this evening. One was already touched on in the first public comment, but our boys, I had the opportunity to go and see the boys compete in the state meet at Detweiler Park in Peoria. If you've never been, it's a really cool experience. I was not told that I would be running, so I got to break in the new knees a little bit. But it was a great experience. A lot of our fans travel with us, and I know that we're going to talk about some of the results. Sarah's going to talk about some of the results later, but I do want to point out one thing that Evan Nosek, who got third, he's a senior, he became the 16th runner in IHSA history to win 4 state medals. Wow. And that has not been done in a decade. And apparently the last person to do it is a cross-country coach that was there and came up to Coach Clary and talked to him about it. So kind of a cool experience there. And then parent-teacher conferences. Last week we opened our doors and our Zoom calls, or I guess meets calls, for our parents to come in. Just a little bit of feedback from the staff I've spoken to. They talked about some positive interactions with parents, which is always great. But also the high school has reported, some of the teachers have reported that they felt that there was better participation this year. So I think it's great when our parents are getting involved and attending those conferences, especially at the high school level. So that's all I have for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Rowling. Dr. Bogan?
Yes, I have 2 short updates for the board. One is on the track project is quickly coming to a close. Painting was finished last Thursday at about noon. So if you get a chance, please take a look. But Mr. Payton, our Director of Buildings and Grounds, is working with Mr. Roman, our Athletic Director, to get our track coaches out to the track, along with the contractor to do that final walkthrough so that we can officially get that punch list completed and hand this over. So I do expect to have that final pay app very shortly and to be wrapping this up. So hopefully next week, many pictures to follow. And then secondly, just wanted to let the board, we do have a health insurance committee meeting this week on Thursday the 14th at 4 p.m. at the district office. So board member Simmons sits on that committee, but we will have our 3rd meeting of the year. So
Okay.
that's all.
Thank you, Dr. Bogan. Ms. Slattery?
Just want to start off saying happy Veterans Day. Boys cross country competed at state in Peoria on Saturday. They placed 5th overall in the 2A meet, with notable placings including senior Evan Nosek, who ran a time of 14:36.7, taking 3rd place overall. Freshman Carson Kaiser with a time of 14:41.3, taking 6th place. And junior Evan Wilden with a time of 15:10.7, taking 36th. I just want to congrats the boys. They did phenomenal, and their season was really great to watch and whatnot, and they're going to go very far. The KHS Theater Department started rehearsals last week for their winter play called Media, which is a Greek tragedy involving a former princess taking bloody revenge on her family, and it will be held in the Black Box Theater in January. The KHS girls basketball program will begin practicing for their winter season today, whereas the boys will be beginning tryouts today, continuing for the next 2 to 3 days. Finally, boys bowling started their season 2 weeks ago and had their first competition on Saturday, and the girls program will be starting next week.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Slattery. All right. Any member of the board, something to add? All right, now we move on to topics for future agendas.
So it's not really a topic, it's just that I really love that we were able to use Sarah tonight in the conversation we had with the student surveys. So any way we can do more of that, I think it would be great. So if we can find more roles for her, that'd be awesome.
I'll talk to her about that, next time we meet.
You're welcome.
I have some presentations she can do.
Any other topics for a future agenda?
Oh, I just want to bring it back up. Dr. Bogan, I know I emailed you about this, about athletic fees for outside programs, for feeder teams and all that stuff. I know you said we were going to bring that conversation back up at some point. Was that back in December, January, that's going to come back up?
So we will do that in the spring,
Oh,
so
in the
it'll
spring.
most likely be in April
Okay.
that we'll have that conversation again.
All right, perfect.
All right. Any other topics for future agendas? All right. Seeing none, we'll... All right. We'll have closed session coming up.
Public comment, second.
Oh, public
second.
comment, second time? Yep. All right. Megan, please.
Hi again, everyone. I won't take too long, obviously only 3 minutes, but this was a great meeting to come to. I was glad I was able to make it. Great information. And it was absolutely my favorite because of the data. For those of you who don't know me yet, I work in K-12 education and teach at the university, and I love data and evidence-based practice. So I really found this as kind of a call to action. When you look at the numbers for our report card, our school report card, it's my favorite piece of paper right now, our ELA is only at 40% where we need to be in our 3 through 8. So I know it's kind of smushing both together, but and our math is the 26.5% at or exceeding levels. Now, I know some things were brought up about the curriculum and the change. I am absolutely thrilled that we are in a math curriculum review this year for implementation next year. And our kids are different now than they were 10 years ago or pre-COVID. Life has changed, unfortunately or fortunately, but it's changed, and it's more important than ever that we make sure that we implement this new curriculum with fidelity, with the PD, and with acknowledging that our kids have changed and meeting those needs. And honestly, as we lose teachers and there's turnover, that was a great question you brought up, we're losing a lot of their knowledge in the PD they had experienced before. And unfortunately, too many teachers are looking to teachers pay teachers to fill some of those gaps that they don't know. I really do care about our community and all our schools, including the ones that my kids don't go to, because we are one community, even though we have 9 municipalities. You know, we are this one huge community, so it matters to me where all of our schools are, and that's why I'm speaking up so much about this. And I know growth was good, but in reality, we were below that 50th percentile. That means more of the state is growing faster than we are. So that number at 41% for ELA growth and the number of 42% for math growth isn't where we need to be. We do need to be higher than that. So the best we can do is look at the math curriculum, which we're doing, yay, and look at our ELA curriculum. And, you know, I'm not here mad, I'm not here angry, I'm here with a call to support, like a call to support the curriculum, a call to support math, but also a call to look at that ELA curriculum and look at the reading of science and make sure we're really hitting everything we know. That reading of science has really kind of been new in the last few years, so really examining the research that's come out of there to make sure what we have is right. I'm truly also here as a call to support our schools and actually considering and really thinking about that referendum. I know that's not quite here yet, but the more we hear about it, the more we need to acknowledge that our kids need a safe, happy, healthy place to be in order to learn. And there's going to be a big ask, you know, for a school or a new one. I mean, you know, just for fun, if we're spending that much money, might as well get the new car. But thanks so much, and I look forward to working with you still.
Thank you, Ms. Pisano. Anybody else? Public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move on to, we are scheduled for closed session. The Board of Education is scheduled for a closed session to discuss Illinois Open Meetings Act, Section 2, sub C, sub 1, where there will be no action taken following the session. Therefore, after the vote to go into closed session, the recording of tonight's meeting will be concluded. I will entertain a motion to go into closed session to discuss Illinois Open Meetings Act, Section 2, sub C, sub 1, at 8:09 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Kleisner?
Aye.
Mr. Cook?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Mankiewicz?
Aye.
Mr. McCauley? Mrs. Simmons?
All right. It carries by